Hi there, Frank Winston here for the Pacifica Historical Society, host of the weekly program Footprints of Pacifica, where we discover and explore the lure and the lore of lovely Pacifica, its character and its characters. The focus of this show is on a landmark here in our community that very few people remember much about, and that is the Dollar Radio Station. Oh boy. Most of you probably don't know where it's located or any of its history of this landmark. But decades past, there were 9 giant towers along the Old Coast Highway, and 2 of them were 250 feet high. This was part of the headquarters of the Globe Wireless Network, which started in 1927 as Dollar Radio, serving as a wireless radio station for the Dollar Lines, a steamship company that had been founded by Robert Dollar. And who was Robert Dollar? An immigrant from Scotland who started a sawmill in this area in 1893, but he wanted control over his product, the transportation of it. And so he started his own steamship company, the Dollar Lines, in 1900, and primarily to transport lumber from here to Asia. By the 1920s, he had purchased 7 President's ships from the United States government, and at the age of 80, got into the round-the-world passenger ship business as the President's Line. He passed on the reins to his son Stanley in the late 1920s, and when he died, Robert Dollar was one of the nation's richest men. But in the 1926 period, a little site by Muscle Rock here in what is now Pacifica, was selected to be the center of Dollar Line's ship-to-shore communication. There was a transmitting station and a receiving station, plus the towers that I had mentioned. Today, all that remains is the receiving station, now a private residence. And our guest today is the owner of that residence, Joan Class Levin. And first, before discussing matters with Joan, let's take a look at a visual of how it was and how it is today. Let's roll the tape.
got cleaned up. I said, no, this is where I am. Most of the time.
In the studio with me tonight, our guest, Joan Klaas-Levin, who is the current owner of that historic landmark. And first, I'd like to find out what brought you to become the owner of that property. Were you living in this area, or did you come from out of the area?
Well, my husband and I were living in San Francisco, but we had 2 tragedies, and Marvin knew I liked the coast. So we took a drive one day and discovered the Dollar radio station. At the time, I did not want a large piece of property and a large home. So we looked further, but for a small amount of money, in addition to what was available at the time, was the Dollar radio station.
And did you have an interest in the history of it at all, or was it a coincidence that it just happened to be owned by the Dollar family?
Well, because of my background in decoration, of course, the history was very important to me, but more so was the property and the interior from the previous owners of the building.
And when did you acquire the building?
About 1977.
And what shape was it in, if you could describe?
It was about 3/4 done.
When you say done, was it being revitalized in some manner or redecorated or what?
Well, the 2 men, one was an architect and one was a cabinet maker, they were not as involved in the history as I had become. So they turned it into a home, more or less.
So they were restoring it before you came upon it?
Well, they didn't really restore it.
Okay.
They just added it to make it look like more of a home rather than a radio station.
Now, but you've lived there since how long now?
From 1977 to the present time.
Did you, in going through it, acquire some artifacts or find some photographs or radio signals of some sort or anything?
Well, I was interested in the history, so therefore I researched it out, and a gentleman who lived in San Francisco and worked in the city had the photographs that you see today. He had actually worked at the radio station.
Oh, he had knowledge of the radio station itself, but he didn't want to live there, as it wasn't set up as a residence at that time.
Correct.
Okay. Now, what's been happening since it? First of all, it's been your residence, it's private residence. Was it available to the public to come and see this historic thing, or did people drive by and say, can I take a picture of your home or anything like that?
Well, it seems like when people get lost on the beach and they come up the back stairs, then they'll be interested in seeing the building. So I've shown them through. But several years ago, I felt that I would like to contribute to our community in this way, to open the house to visitors.
And is it presently open to visitors, or by arrangement, or how does that work?
Well, you could phone me, and my telephone number
Please give it,
is
yeah, and we'll put it on the credits later, but go ahead.
650-359-4893.
They always say in radio and television, repeat it, so I'll try it. 359-4893.
Right.
No confusion there. Right. And they'll reach you, Joan.
They can reach me and make an appointment, and I'd be more than happy to show them through the building.
And also the view as well, they get that at the same time?
Yes. Okay. The main motive in me doing it is the house needs so much refurbishing. It's very worn, and the photographs that you saw, there were some of the worn portions of the property, and so any contributions would always be appreciated.
Now, do you have any restrictions in refurbishing it any way you want, or does the city have anything to say, or the commission, the Ocean Commission?
Okay, that idea would probably take $1 million. But to really
to meet their standards?
Yes. I always say, whoever comes to help me, let's make it the Ritz-Carlton of Pacifica. But that will take a lot of money. just to make it more visual appreciation to the public, it would not take that much money. But it needs to be refurbished in what is worn now and not really changing anything in the building.
Do you know, you were president of the Pacifica Historical Society. Do you know whether the society, or whether through yourself, have ever located some remnants of things that either were part of the Dollar ship or the Dollar radio station, any of the shipping lines?
Yes, when we first moved there, there were some landmarks that were left, and I've left them intact.
So, and they're identified, or it can be?
Well, they can be. I haven't gotten to that point yet.
Okay, how about from the Dollar lines? Who does that own? The Maytag today, or Pacific Telephone, or some other company, or where are they gone? Do they merge, or do you have any idea?
I heard that they moved down the peninsula. Where? I'm not sure, but somewhere around Palo Alto or further down, maybe Sunnyvale.
And did you ever ride on a Dollar line?
No, that was
the present line.
I think that was a little before my time.
They went out of business by then.
Yeah, well, let's see. If you date me, it was 39 that I was born.
Oh, yeah. Well, so much for that. You grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and you said you studied both history and interior decorating?
Well, mainly interior design. I went to Parsons School of Design.
Oh, yeah. It was probably named after James Parson, our floor manager here. But if not. Now, when the place was taken over by you, did neighbors or anyone else come and say, can we help you in restoring it? Or do you know how important this place was? Or were you just sort of out on your own, so to speak?
Well, at the time, there were no neighbors. I remember I moved here in 1977. So the condos, which are to the south of me, were not built. It was an empty lot. And to the north, it's still a vacant lot.
Is there a highway, but isn't it toward the end of Palmetto? Is it towards the end of one of the major streets here?
Yes, that used to be the main street into the San Francisco.
But that's after you got here. Something happened there. Before you came here from San Francisco, what were you doing in San Francisco? Were you in your profession or just?
No, I was active in certain organizations, but just being, as you say, a housewife.
Oh, they had those in those days. The housewife did something, and we won't get into that's more political than anything else today. What is it that you found to be the most fascinating about the house itself, what it was used for, or even now how it was designed?
Could you ask me that question again?
Yeah, is there anything in it that you find extremely unusual, or you've seen other homes before? Is there anything special that you've noticed in the way this was laid out or refurbished?
All right. I think the men had some very good ideas, and what they did in the photographs that you see or the video, the bedroom had a wallpaper of Arabic horses, and they translated that into the bathroom in tile work, which is really exquisite. That's probably the prettiest room of the house, is the bathroom. Then they divided the long room, which I guess housed the transmitters, into two separate rooms. One, a small office, and then secondly, a living room which faces the ocean.
In its history, I heard, and maybe you can verify, that when Admiral Byrd conducted his experiment in Antarctica, the first communication to know that they were still alive and had found what they went to explore came through the Dollar radio.
That is correct.
So
yes.
That was quite a significant. Do you recall, or had you heard of any other significant communications?
Yeah. Not to that magnitude.
That would have been the major thing, certainly. Do you have any concern with communications today? Then it was wireless, then we had cable, and we have wireless Wi-Fi coming in today. Do you have any connection with that industry, or you're just as the owner of the residence, or did you study any of this?
No, I'm just an owner of the residence.
Okay.
For over 20 years, and I still am in the San Mateo book, I ran a very popular animal organization.
That was connected with the rescues and the like?
Correct.
Yeah, can you mind to tell us a little more about that? And did you operate it from this particular residence as well?
I certainly did,
Please
yes.
tell us a little more about that part of the history.
Okay. Well, first of all, I was the first small nonprofit that communicated and had good rapport with the shelter systems. And I went out throughout the state of California and developed the first animal service directory, which is still ongoing. They update it every year.
What do you mean, service directory where anyone could call or locate a shelter?
Correct.
Okay, and that didn't exist before. They were all separate and scattered, and you founded those here.
Right, yes.
Okay. Are you still active in that movement?
Well, I just do consulting now. So somebody will call me and they'll want to know where the shelter is in San Mateo County. So I will direct them. Or they have a stray cat, or there's this one woman right now that I really have to call back and see if I can rescue some feral cats for her and domesticate them.
Well, I've read in the San Mateo County newspaper in the last year there's great concern about the number of animals that are rescued and how they get adopted or don't get adopted. Have you involved in that part of it as well?
Not now. There are many, as you had mentioned, that have taken over my popularity and are doing very well.
Okay. Now, I want to, before we run out of time, I want to repeat, the people who would like to see this location and contribute towards you know, you're not looking for the $1 million, but if that came, you'd find a purpose for that too.
That is correct.
But right now, if people were to call you and make a donation of whatever you require, or expect, or hope, that would help getting plans together to make it a further landmark. We call it a landmark. It's not really registered as a landmark yet, is it?
No, not at all yet.
But that might help get it that.
Well, at least it would be. It would at least be more presentable to the public.
Well, right now, could people have meetings there if they chose to?
I'm hoping to have events there.
Well, may I bid on the Pacific Historical Society having an event there if no group has met there yet as such, other than for your nonprofit situation? Well, we won't book a date on the air,
Okay.
but that would be wonderful, because then our members and our programs are open to the public, so that when we do have an event at a quarterly meeting, as we call them, at your location, people will have an opportunity to hear also from you and from others who know some of the history of that location. We could even, at that point, show some more of these photographs. Okay.
That's always welcome.
All right. And once again, the phone number for them?
Is 650-359-4893.
Now, when the property was located as a station, was there any connection with the railroad? Of course, the Ocean Shore Railroad was no longer running, but does some of the tracks go by your location?
Supposedly, they do.
You haven't traced that yet.
That is correct.
But you're in that area.
Well,
it folded before you got here.
the video is very beautiful, and fortunately for the video, there's a lot of work that has to be done. So most of my time is consumed in making the property look very clean and neat, even though it needs a lot of work.
Is it fully accessible, though, or you talk about those steps? Do people have to climb the steps to get there, or is there also on a level accessible?
Well, if you enter from the front of the property, of the Palmetto side, then there's a gate, electric gate that can open, and you can enter it that way. if you want to come through the beach access, then you have to do a little exercising.
Well, I think I'll skip that part of it. How about the condition where you're nearer to the ocean? Has the waves or any of the wind and the storms that Pacifica had been noted for affected the property that you could tell?
Oh yes, every year at least a foot disappears.
A foot of the grounds or the shore? What?
Of the earth.
Okay.
Through heavy storms. And unfortunately this year, before the storms really began, we had some sabotage. So at least more than a foot disappeared.
And now, does the city of Pacifica do anything in that regard, or the county, or you're sort of on your own when there's damage? Do you call them? What happens in that regard?
Well, several years, I think it was in '89, FEMA came out. And because the house didn't fall into the ocean, I was not on their application schedule.
And so you would have had to lose the house in order to recover. And of course, at that point, you could not rebuild that which was historic. So,
well, that's correct, but the house was still intact. It was the land that started to fall into the ocean.
Okay, well, we're happy for that, at least.
Right.
And the opportunity to come to the, you want to give us the address too, so that people can stop by and knock on the door and say,
well,
it's a good time, or would you rather just phone you?
Right now, they should just make an appointment.
Okay, all right. Is there any signs, were there any signs from the radio station that are still intact or would be useful at a museum of sorts?
No, not signs. There have been some, what do you call them?
Equipment?
No, iron holding to cable lines that are still in the ground. There is a fence post that I have left intact. So there may be maybe 3 or 4 of the signs that have to do with the Dollar radio station towers that are still on the property. And of course the little watershed, which I think changed design, but it's in approximately the same location.
Well, we thank you for joining us. We're going to have to wrap up the show one more time for your phone number so people can see this. And then, of course, we'll book the Historical Society to come and invite the public to that, too. But the phone number to reach Joan Levin
is 650, again, 359-4893.
We want to thank you for being with us tonight and sharing some of the experience of owning a landmark. Very few people can own a landmark. You have one. You're helping to preserve it. We want to see that it gets restored.
Thank you very much, Frank, for inviting me.
And I want to say that lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints in the sands of time.